Hi everyone, sorry, we're a little bit, I gotta do HTML and share screen. Okay, I'm sorry, I was just visiting my friend in the hospital and I had to come back. I forgot how long it takes to come back from Manhattan. Um, and then I tried buying a drink um, from one of the Queens College vending machines and forget it. That's like you got to be really lucky. Okay, let me just do the sound, actually. So is anybody, no one's audio, audio this whatever. Okay, so I should be able to hear you if you see something. Uh, okay, so let's get working. So, um, okay, so today I wanted to do two things. So we'll start with a new design pattern. So far we've done the strategy pattern, right? And today I want to do a form of the strategy pattern called the observer pattern. And it's such a well-known example that um, it has its own name. It's really the strategy pattern, but it's just a form of it. So, um, so let's get into it. So let's see, IntelliJ. Okay, so basically I'm going to create a project, and usually what we do with design patterns is we we do it the wrong way, and then we see what's wrong with that, and then we do it the right way. So that way, otherwise you don't really appreciate what's going on. Does that make sense? Right, first you try, see, because otherwise you don't see what does it give you? Like, why am I doing it this way? So let's do the observer pattern, observer pattern, um, fall 2025. Okay. Oh, should I turn off the light so you guys can see better? Uh, so let me just turn off the light. I think it's better. Okay, let me know. I had a student who didn't like when I turned off the light. Oh, okay, so let's start out with let's say we have a stock market, right? Or it could be anything, but okay. And in our stock market, we're going to have two methods. This is going to be very simple, it's very basic. So we're going to have um, a buy and sell. So, oh yeah, I better put um, just for the fun of it, let's just create a stock cell and let's just create a stock object. So I'll just call it a stock. And we'll have the stock market buy and sell stocks, right? So we'll take a stock. Oops, stock. No, yeah, stock. And we'll buy and sell stocks, right? Now, um, when we buy or sell stock, actually, let's put something in stock just to make it fun. So let's do a private name string, and um, let's do we'll get a getter just for the fun of it. We'll do a public getter. So that's going to get the name. and we're going to set it when we create the stock in the constructor. So, okay, am I going too fast? Okay, let me know. Okay, I'll explain anything. So let's do a constructor, and the constructor is going to set the value of the stock. And if you want to know what it is, um, you could call get names. So for example, over here, we could say something like uh, S out um, uh, buying um, this stock, and then we could do plus stock dot get name, right? So I'll just make it easy to do. And then cell will do the same thing. Okay. So far it's simple, right? We're saying selling the stock. Okay, so in main, we're going to create a stock market, right? And we're going to buy and sell, right? So we could have a stock market over here and equals to new stock market. And we could do stock market dot buy, and we could do new stock, and we'll pass in, um, let's say, um, Microsoft. I can spell that right. And then maybe Google, whatever, right? Maybe Tesla. Okay. Okay. Now, so far so good, right? So if we run this, it's very simple. We're buying these three stocks, right? Um, okay. Okay, so we could buy these three stocks. Oh, we left out one little thing, which is in the stock market, we need to keep track of the stocks, right? So, well, we should, right? So over here, we're going to create a list of, now, are you familiar with this? This is a template. Um, Actually, I forgot what they call this. I think in Java, it's called like a template, meaning that we could pass in any type we want. So in this case, we want to have a list of stock or my stocks, and we're going to keep a now equals to a new. Now, okay, I'll explain a little bit what's going on here. Okay, the way it works is list. If you look at list, if I do control click on it, you'll see it's not really a actual class, it's an interface, right? So because it's an interface, um, it has to actually, it has to, um, you can't create it, right? 'Cause remember, we said interface is like an advertisement, right? So this is basically like a, um, abstract type of object, but but you can't create a list. I mean, in Java, in C Sharp, you actually could, but in Java, you actually have to create a different type. You have to create a list which implements that interface. So if we look at um, array list, we'll see that it's going to inherit. It's going to implement. Um, See, it implements list. You see? So the way it works is, you don't have to remember this, just so, I remember the first time I saw this, I was very confused. Like, what's going on here? Why on the left side does it say list and the right side says array list? And the answer is because list in Java is a interface, so you can't create it. So you have to create a actual object called ArrayList, which implements this interface, right? Remember we said when it interfaces, it's an advertisement, right? So it has to have certain capabilities. So ArrayList has all the capabilities specified in list, okay? Therefore, we could do it. So, anyhow, there was just like a side point. You don't have to remember that, but so over here, when we buy, we could just add stocks, and when we sell, we could just do my stocks um, that remove, right? So we could um, uh, it's lowercase remove. Okay, wait a second, we have a problem. Okay, remove if, and we need a predicate. We need like, I've never used this before, but I think remove if. Let me just see something. Let me just see. But this is what I want. Remove. Oh, so you could say remove if. Okay, so it's nearly the same as in C sharp. They just do it a little bit different. Okay, so basically we're saying remove if, and let me just see the example again. They do, okay. So we're going to remove if stock, if the S, it's my stocks is a list of stocks, right? So we're going to remove if S, meaning any individual stock, is S dot get name equals to stock get name. Okay, I need two of those. Okay, so basically we're gonna, because it's a little bit complicated, because the references might not be the same. So, okay. Let me just, okay, so basically, we're just looking for a stock with that name, and if it has the same name as the one we pass in, then we sell it, okay? So for example, in Maine, we could, um, we could sell Tesla. And even though it's a different object, but it has the same name. So, so we could go over here, we could, okay, I hope I didn't lose everybody with that example. Um, okay, so, um, okay, so far we're gonna buy, we just always add it, and then we sell by just removing where in that list, we look at every stock and we're going to remove it if the name is equal to the stock we're trying to sell, right? So we're not looking for actual uh, objects, we're looking for objects with that name, okay? Um, Actually, we could even make it simpler and we could sell by, but just by name. be more clear. So we'll just sell things which have that name. Oh, I just forgot. You can't use equals. You have to use dot equals compared to. Compared to name equals to 0. In C sharp you could, but okay. So basically, we're passing in a name, and we're just going to sell every stock with that name. Okay. So we're going to just get rid of, okay? And then over here in main, we're just going to pass in Tesla. Okay, that's the, okay. Um, okay, so that's the basic code. Now, okay, so now we haven't gotten to the observer pattern yet. Okay, let's move into, okay, so this is our basic stock market. And one more thing we want is we want to have people who get notified when the when a stock is bought or sold. So we have, let's say, a portfolio, or actually, let's just do we could have, let's say, um, in other words, we want to have a bunch of, um, let's say, yeah, okay, so let's say portfolio. Let me just think of, let's say newspapers. Uh, Newspaper, right? So we want to do is we want to um, be able to notify different newspapers if something happens, if something is being sold, right? And uh, void notify, and let's just do, we'll just keep it simple, the name of the stock. And then we need a Boolean, which is going to be buy. So if it's true, we're buying. If it's false, we're selling. So if buy, then S out, um, newspaper reports um, let's say um, sorry, Java is very, as far as I know. Okay, so we buy else. Okay, so we have, if we're buying, with the newspaper is going to report its bought, and otherwise, so we can have different newspapers, right? And so, for example, we could have, oh, and then we want to notify them. So we would like to do is have a bunch of newspapers, a list of newspapers, which are going to, um, right now, I'll just make it public. So, whenever we buy or sell, we're going to notify the um, newspapers um, for Okay, so for each newspaper dot N in newspapers, oops, we're going to notify it that we're going to notify it that um, um, and uh, I'm sorry, stock. Okay, what's going on here? I'm not sure what's doing there. Okay, let me just fix that up. Okay, so what's doesn't like? Oh, N. Okay, so hmm, huh? Newspaper. Oh, I have to give it a, oh, I'm sorry. I have to say it's true, right? We want to buy it. Otherwise, we want to sell, right? Actually, let me get rid of that. I'll just do. Okay, so let me get rid of the print line over here. Okay, so we'll keep it simple. So in Maine, if we go to newspapers, um, so we could do newspaper, um, New York Times equals a new newspaper. Um, I don't know, what else could you have? Um, newspaper, New York Post, New York Post. This is called the Post equals to new newspaper. And then in the stock market, we could add all these newspapers. Okay, so we're going to add NYT and we're going to add Post. So now when we buy and sell stocks, we're going to be notified by, by the, okay, so every time, so each newspaper is, so you can see it twice, right? Microsoft bought, Google bought, Tesla bought. This needs to be fixed up. Um, I have to make this sold. Sorry about that. Okay, um, so back here again, the last one should be sold. Okay, so over here it sold to Tesla and it bought Microsoft, right? So basically, we have a list of, we have a stock, we have a list of stocks, and we have a list of newspapers. And every time we buy or sell a stock, the list, the newspapers are notified, right? Now, let's say we have another listener. Let's say we have government wants to know about it also. So, okay. And so they also want to have it be notified. So let's just copy this code. Okay. So what's going on here is now we want the government to know about it. Well, so we'll just create another list of governments, right? So we could have um, list of governments equals new. Okay, and then we would over here we would add a list of governments. Okay, I don't want to go through the whole thing. Okay, but we would do something um, like stock markets um, that governments. You do something like add new government, and then um, over here you would have, oops, over here you would, in here, you would have to have another loop, right? So over here you would have, just like we have a loop for government, for newspapers, we would have to go through all the governments, right? So we have like this, government, and let's say G for government, governments, and it would be G, and then we would have this over here also. Um, and it would be uh, just name, and it'll be false. Okay, so if we run this, we'll see that not only is the newspaper finding out about it, uh, uh, there we go. I don't know what's the problem. I think because I'm not in Maine, doesn't know which one to run. So we run now. Here we Yeah, so over here you get the newspaper is also, the newspaper and the government are all getting this information, right? So, okay, so this is one way of doing this. The problem is that is, okay, so what do we need an observer pattern for? Well, the problem is every time we add a new type of listener, what's going to happen? We're going to have to keep on changing this code, right? We're going to have to keep on, or let's say we remove types of listeners, we're going to have to keep on adding or modifying. You see, it gets kind of gross, right? This code, right? Because the every time we want to add a type of listener, we have to keep on changing this code, right? Does that make sense? Right? Does it make sense? Because we have to have we're keeping us. I mean, right? Look how complicated it is. Every type of listener has their own list, right? What would make more sense? To what? To combine them into one list, right? How would we combine this into one type of list? they're two different types. One's a stock, I'm sorry, one's a government, and one is a newspaper, right? Let me put them together. So it'd be nice to have just one list of people who are what you would call observer, right? Because they're both one and they both actually use the same method, right? The government gets a notify method and the stock market has a notify, I'm sorry, and the newspaper has the same notify method, right? So, but they're two different objects, right? Completely different objects, but they share one thing in common in that they have the same notify method. So what does that sound like? What does this sound like when you have one piece of functionality that's shared by two different objects, right? So so there's two ways to do this. One way would be to have them inherit. In other words, we could create a observer and the observer class could have um, this method. Over here. And the same thing with, this is the observer. Uh, what's the related problem? And then I'm sorry, then the newspaper could inherit from the observer. Okay, and the government could inherit from the observer. So that way, they're both sharing the same notify, right? And and then within the stock market, we could just make one list, which would be the observer, and it would just be the observers, and then we could get rid of these two lists, and we could say, oops, I got rid of the wrong thing. We get rid of this list, so we don't need the government or newspapers, right? We would just have the observers. What are they called? Observers. For each observer, O. So for each observer, we would just call O, and then we just have one list. And then same thing here, we would just have same thing, except O in observers. And we have the exact same code over here when we sell. So we don't need all the, right? We don't have to, we just keep one list, right? So, okay. So if we do it this way, we just have to fix this up and just say observers, um, observers, observers. Okay. And now everybody is observer. So if we run it now, it would be, the only problem is the observer is going to be a little bit observer, right? Because it's not really, um, okay. So this will work. if we go back to main. And now the only thing we have to do is we require anybody that's an observer, anybody that wants to get information has to inherit from observer, right? So this is one way to solve the problem, okay? Is using inheritance, okay? But that's not the observer pattern. The observer pattern says, wait a second, remember we said we don't like inheritance, right? Because that means we're forcing government to, and newspaper to inherit from observer, right? We don't like that. So instead, we're going to do is we're going to make observer be an interface, okay? So rather than be a class, it's going to be a interface, and it's going to have one method called notify, and actually we're going to get rid of the public part of it, and we're going to have the the newspaper is going to not inherit, it's going to implement the observer, and therefore it's going to have this, it's going to be back to this one, newspaper. And let me just put this into um, the government also. So the government is going to implement, not inherit, and it's going to have government. And then, okay, so now we go back to the stock market. What happened to that? So now we made observer to be actually this code won't change because we made it a observer to be a interface, and actually everything else is going to work. The only thing is in main, we, oh, and this will also work. That's pretty cool. So if you make an interface, we're going to, it's going to still work. So if we run this now, right, so we're back to where we were before. So the only thing is, the benefit is that we have inside the stock market, we only have one list of observers, okay? So let's summarize what we did today. So, okay, I mean, I know it's a lot. I just want to, okay, let's look at the observer pattern, okay? Um, so, okay, what is the idea behind the observer pattern? So, observer pattern. So what is the concept? Make it bigger. So, the observer pattern has two ideas. One is we don't like, we want to be, does anybody remember the open close principle from last week? Does anybody know what it stands for? What, open for what, closed for what? Open for, so observer pattern uses open closed principle, which means that every time we add an observer, what do? We create a new class, right? So for example, we have two types of observers. We have a newspaper and the government, right? And every time we add a new one, we just have to add, we create a new class, right? So we're not, we don't, but the actual stock market doesn't need to change, right? So we're just adding a, a new type of class that implements the interface, right? So, and that's all we have to do. And then we could just put it into main, right? We could add, any type of observer we want, right? We could do, as long as they implement the interface, right? That's number one. So it's open close principle because we, um, uh, i- if we add a new or listener slash observer, sorry, we don't need to modify the stock market class, right? We just um, we the listener implement the observer interface. Okay, so that's one thing. So everybody got that? Everybody see that? So every time we want to add a new observer, right, all that we say is they just have to implement um, the the observer interface, and then they could work, right, without doing any, without changing the stock market, right? So the stock market is open for extension, closed for modification. Everybody get that? Right, so we don't, okay, got that? So, because it's a generic type of list, right? The other thing is, we said was, we prefer, um, um, we prefer composition rather than inheritance. Right, we don't like doing inheritance. So in this case, it doesn't really fit in so well, but the idea is we're not doing inheritance, but rather we're doing, we don't like inheritance because inheritance gets very messy. Because, for example, let's say you have government is already inheriting from some other class, right? How are you going to get the observer in there, right? Let's say, for example, government, let's say you have let's say we have a class called institution, right? And we have government already inherits institution, institution. But so in this case, how are we going to get the observer in there, right? You see? In other words, you can only inherit from one object. So government is already inheriting from institution, right? But if you have a interface, then you could do that. You could still do it. So so over here you could implement more than one interface. Okay, there's no limit. So in this case over here, it's impossible. The only way you could use the observer is by not by, you can't use inheritance because it's already being used for another object. So if you want government to implement the observer, right, you have to, use interface, okay? So we prefer composition, or in this case, an interface, um, because we cannot, well, government cannot, is already inheriting from institution. And you can only inherit from one class, okay? So implement any number of interfaces. So I'll just point this out. Note an interface allows totally different objects that have one thing in common. In this case, the notify method. In this case, the notify method. And to be treated the same. Okay. Okay. So in this case, right? So for example, um, the observers only, example two, in this case, to be an observer, you just need, I'm sorry, not to be an observer, to get informed about a stock sale, you just need to implement the notify method. Okay, so the interface is a beautiful way of treating different objects. If they have one thing in common, to treat them the same. Okay? So it's a very nice, clean way of doing it. So even though they don't inherit the same things, but as long as they just do something in common, we could treat them, we could look at the things they have in common, right? It's like, for example, if you have um, a bunch of people, yeah, you could treat them all, even though some are tall, some are short, right? But they all, let's say they all could walk, right? So you could treat them, you could like, lead a tour, right? You could be a tour guide as long as everybody could walk, right? So long as they have that one thing in common, they could be a child, they could be an adult, they could be an older person, they could be, anything. As long as they could walk, you could lead them on a tour, right? So we're just looking at the things that we need for them to do, right? Some could be fat, skinny, short, whatever they are. As long as they could walk, they could join, right? Could be an animal even, right? As long as they could walk, they could join the tour, right? So that's our only requirement. So, so an interface, when you do things, when you're treating objects, just looking for things they have in common, so then it's much easier to have code which is easy to modify, right? Because you're not saying you have to inherit from this thing. You're not saying you have to do a million things. You just have to do this one thing that I care about, which is, in the case of a stock market, is to notify. Okay? So let me just save this document before I forget it. So, um, browse. And now I'm going to do something totally different. Okay? The pattern. If you have any questions, make sure you ask me, okay? If you don't understand anything I wrote here, okay? Um, you can either email me or meet after class or whatever if you have any questions. Okay? I'm just going to take a drink. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Um, so tonight, now I just wanted to start with um, something totally different, and we'll continue this on Thursday. So what I want to do is, this is a program to do UML, okay? So I wanted to just take a quick look at UML diagrams, okay? So this is a program that you could download for free. There are lots of them on the internet. Um, this happens to be a Windows program. So if you have an Apple computer, you could use a web-based. It's um, it's not like you have to actually actually, yeah. Whatever. The point is that it's there's a lot of tools that create it. This is actually a little bit slow. Um, this is a free edition, the community edition. And, um, okay, so I don't want to take a look. They're forcing me. AI description generator. Oh boy. Everybody is, um, no. Okay, so let's start a new project. And we'll call this um, 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 a UML for 2025. And okay, so the first thing, okay, this is how this tool works. Okay, you have a project, and then within a project, you have different types of diagrams, right? The UML is a general, there are different types of diagrams you could create in UML. Okay, UML stands for Unified Modeling Language. Okay, and it's not important about the origins. It's a whole, but basically the idea is that if you go to new, you can see there's lots of different types of diagrams. I'm not even sure all these are UML. Some of these might be made up, but the class diagram is definitely UML. So, well, look at all these things, AWS. Okay, so we'll do a class diagram. Okay, a class diagram is basically um, a diagram that shows objects and their relationship with each other. Okay? So for example, let's just I'll do one object. This will be, make it a little bit larger. We'll call this, let's say this will be animal. Okay? And let's say we have another class called, see, you have interface and whatever. I don't want interface. Oh no, what happened to my class? Uh, oh no. I don't know. I'll just copy this. I don't want interface. I want a class. Uh, Let me just copy this and paste it. Okay. So now, uh, I'm sorry. I want to move this away. And this will be a cow. Okay, so we have two objects, an animal and a cow. And what's the relationship between them? So, well, oh, I got mixed up because it thinks they're copies of each other. Oh, gosh. Uh, I gotta hide this. And I gotta delete one of these. Okay, so we have a cow. What happened to her? Oh, what happened to my, oh, I know, I could do right click. Add shape. Okay, class. Here we go. Okay. I don't know. Sometimes it gets confused over here. So we have animal. And one thing we could say that won't change is that every cow is a animal, right? As far as, right? So we could say that since every cow is an animal, remember it's is a relationship, and is a relationship uses inheritance. So we could say over here, a cow is okay, so this is our first UML symbol. So we have two things going on here. We have these two objects, animal and cow, and we have this arrow that's showing every cow is inheriting, every cow inherits from animal, okay? Now it's a little confusing. I was always confused by this because why is cow pointing to animal, not animal pointing to cow? Okay, so, and the answer is because it's called generalization. Now, generalization is inheritance. It's just a UML way of making things complicated. Okay, so whenever you see the word generalization, it means inheritance. So because it's generalization, so that's why the arrow is pointing up, because the cow, the animal, is a general form of a cow. Get it? General. So, whatever, that's why they have, it's a little bit nuts that they have the arrow going from the cow to the animal, right? Because the cow really inherits from the animal. Okay, but this is showing. I think could I put something? Could I type something here? Um, oh yeah, I could type something here. So over here we're showing that a cow inherits from an animal. Okay, or or what's the other way we said it? Or a cow is an animal, right? Is a animal, right? Every cow happens to be an animal, okay? So, okay, that's good. Um, and, um, okay, so that, I'll just move this a little, I'll move this apart a little bit. So, um, uh, uh, no, I don't want to do that. I want to get rid of that. What did it do here? Okay. And then let me delete it. I want to delete this thing. Oh gosh. Anyhow, yes. Okay. And then I just want to drag this over here so the arrow is somewhere. Okay. Okay. So that's going to be that. Um, okay. So, now, so that's what we'll finish off today. Oh yeah, I'll just show you one more thing. Within the animal, you could add, remember there's two things that every object could do. They can either hold data, so that would be like an attribute. So for example, this is like we could have every animal, let's say, breathes. I'm sorry, no, we want to hold data, this is data. So every animal, um, let's say, what property they have. They have, um, let's say they have eyes. I don't know if it's true, but let's say all animals have eyes. Oh, wait. Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. Right. And then the other thing is we could add an operation called like eats. Every animal eats, right? So, so we have over here, no, by the way, the minus means private and the public, but it's not important. In other words, you see how complicated these things are? We're not gonna, we're not gonna get into every single possible UML thing, right? I'm just doing the very basic stuff. So an animal has a weight and it has a method called eats. And you could tell it because it has parentheses. Okay, if you want to, it just happens to be that the minus means private and the plus means um, it's public. Okay, so but it's not like we're not going to learn every UML uh, uh, option possible, right? Because if you do, then this thing's could. That's not the point. The point is just to be able to quickly show relationships between objects. Okay, we're not trying to learn. Um, like if you look over here, um, like they have all these things you could do. They have like a million possible things, and um, yeah, they have attributes and operations. I don't know what this is even. Okay, so we're not going to get it through every single possible UML thing. Okay, if you work at a company where they do a lot of UML, then you have to, right? But but it's but we're just doing the basics. So you go for a job interview, you could just say, I know UML. You put that in your resume, and you know the basic UML. So that's what we're going to cover in this course. A bunch of different. Actually, the book also does it. So we're going to cover like different UML diagrams, a few of them. Okay, and actually chapter 4 or 5. Okay, but right now we're just doing what are known as class diagrams. Okay, a class diagram is a diagram that just shows a relationship between objects, which you don't have to like, you could actually see it by analyzing the code. Okay, most of this you could just see by looking, if you have a program that, if I run IntelliJ, I could probably spit out a a class diagram, right? Well, I think it has that option somewhere in there that you could just, it'll just like, um, it'll just create some type of class diagram. Let me just see, and then we'll be finished. Uh, a lot of tools have that. So you don't really need it's not like anything deep. Like tools, we could look for uh, generate, maybe this is not included. Uh, generate JavaDoc. Uh, I don't know what this is going to do. output director. I'm not sure, but there definitely is objects that somewhere in here, I think you could do it. I'm not sure, but generate. I'm not sure, but I know that it's very common to have it. Um, I forgot. I once saw it. I did it. Create. Whatever. No, this is version control. The VC stands for version control. Okay. So we're not hooked up to any version control. Okay. Okay. So that's it for today. Thank you. And sorry for coming late today, but yeah, I just was visiting my friend in the hospital and I forgot how long it takes to get here from Manhattan. Okay. Um, okay. So I'll see you and I'll upload all this stuff. Okay. Good night. Okay. It's funny when, where's the